We went to Japan in 2004, and in 2005 we built our house in Japan, and we lived there for about 6 years. And we were doing really well. I was doing very well in my job in early 2011, and we really had decided to stay in Japan probably a very long time at that point. And then, of course, the earthquake happened, and the situation kind of started escalating, where the information we were getting seemed the situation was, getting worse and worse. One side was saying that there's no risk, and then we would see explosions. And then what really changed everything was Tuesday morning, on March 15th of 2011, when the winds shifted south towards our house, and we were within 100 miles of the Fukushima plant. And our 3-year-old son was a major concern of ours, and we decided to leave. And we had about an hour and a half to take what we could out of that 6-7 years of life there, and we just left. Well, it really was. I think at the time, I really wasn't emotionally prepared. I don't think any of us were, and we didn't know. We were just thinking almost minute by minute. And in retrospect, I think it was something so overwhelmingly sad, because we had spent so much of our lives. I spent most of my life just trying to master my Japanese, master my skills, so that I could work in Tokyo, and that was kind of a lifelong dream. And to have to give that all up was just really too much for me to over the months. I kind of had to come to terms with that, and it was just a really difficult decision. And but of course at the time we were just thinking of what was best, what was the safest thing we could do for our son. And it was what makes it so much more difficult is just the kind of surreal dichotomy between what the media is showing and what sort of the reality that eventually comes out over time. It's just really difficult to see so much conflict, and it's not like we have closure, and to the extent where we feel like everyone we talk to understands. There's two sides to the story, and a lot of people still don't seem to understand, and still don't seem to realize what the situation is and how the situation is ongoing, and that's really difficult, I think, as well. Mm-hmm. I think that it's still some of it's a blur, but I just remember being really I was looking at the moment, and every piece of information counted. And when we actually decided to leave, it really was the time was the important thing. So I said, we're leaving by noon, and that's it. And we're not taking a lot of clothes. We'll buy any clothes we need. And we'll just take the clothes on our backs. And I was still supposed to work. I was still supposed to come into the office, even though the trains were down, because that was kind of the position for most businesses in Tokyo. They wanted to show that everything was normal, and so I had to worry about having extra batteries so that I could work remotely as we're evacuating. And that was one of the crazy moments. Was we're going through the different roads to get out of our area and to get to West Japan, and we're taking the back roads, and I'm helping navigating, and at the same time I'm trying to respond to emails and working remotely from the car. And it was just this really strange sort of you have because at the time it's like you don't want to make a decision to quit your job, to throw away your house, throw away everything at once. What you're hoping for is, all I want to do is move my family out of this dangerous situation, and I wanted to limit the impact as much as possible. I just wanted my family to be safe. And so I was hoping that I could keep my job and work somewhere else, and that eventually things would get better at some point, and we could go back home. And so you're just trying to focus on that aspect and not worry about, well, what if I'm quitting my job by doing this, and what if I'm losing my house by doing this. And you try not to think of all that. You just focus on the immediate danger, and that kind of got us through that moment, and it was just, I think every since we started getting information that the nuclear plant was having trouble, we just we got in this mindset that we just had to make the best decision that we wouldn't regret later, and that was all we were focusing on, and so we just tried to do whatever we could to protect, to make sure our family was safe, but at the same time we didn't want to give up everything that we had worked hard on. So it was kind of this balance, but eventually with what we found out, eventually, knowing that there was a meltdown, knowing the level of contamination, we did have to decide that we were going to leave Japan, and then I did have to quit my job. It was just something that we tried to not think about all at once, I guess. We were just trying to live in the moment, and it's just like we were racing against an invisible cloud of radiation, and it's something that it's surreal, in that, we could see other people were, driving, the roads were very crowded, the highways were shut down because of the earthquake, and it was kind of this, you're running away from an invisible cloud, and you're afraid, you're worried, and you're worried you're going to run out of gasoline on the way to the next gas station, and which is hundreds of miles away, and it's just, but all we could focus on was that moment, of avoiding danger, and we had this very clear feeling of danger, and this very clear understanding that the best decision was just to get away for that amount of time, whatever it was, minute by minute. And then later, we realized that, we were making long-term decisions as well within that short amount of time. So it was something that, again, it's going to probably take a very long time for me to really understand and come to grips with what we went through. So. It was very cold, and one of my concerns is that they didn't provide a lot of information, and they were very unprepared. So the most confident piece of information I have is that the winds were going east. But when we left our house, it was kind of chilly, and there was some very, very light kind of drizzle. It was a very weird sort of weather condition outside. It was kind of overcast, and but so it seemed like it's kind of quiet, and there was just kind of no one was outside, and there was just this feeling that something was coming, I guess. And I don't know if it was the conditions outside as much as just we understood that we were in danger and we had to get out, and it was very kind of eerie, and we're trying to make our way outside of our area north of Tokyo, and of course the way Japan and the Tokyo area is everything kind of centralizes around Tokyo, and all the highways come out of Tokyo, and so we were just going through these back roads and using the navigation system in the car to try to figure out which areas should be okay, and we're looking at gasoline stations next to us that are have 30 cars waiting in the street, blocking the street, basically trying to get gasoline. And so it was just this really, strange situation trying to get out of there. It's almost like, some kind of horror movie or something where it's apocalyptic disaster occurring. Yet you couldn't see anything, all you could see is people's reactions to it. And so it's just a completely surreal moment in our lives that we kind of revisit in our dreams, and when we go to sleep. It's just something that'll stay with us. And the weirdest thing was we were in West Japan for a couple weeks because I was trying to negotiate with my employer to let me work outside of Tokyo for extended time, and so it was every day we'd wake up and it's like, oh wait, my life is different now. And we were really at the sort of top of all this hard work too, because we wanted to live a long time in Japan, and we're kind of, that dream was coming. It was really, we were living that dream, and especially early 2011, it was really, we had kind of come to sort of a peak climax of that dream, and then there wasn't enough time to transition to our new life, and so every day you'd wake up and you'd have to remind yourself of what happened, of the events that took place, and you kind of relived it a little bit, and So, but I think, again, long term, here we are almost a year later, and it's really something that we kind of look back at, and we feel like we made the right decision. Yet, we're still coming to grips with what the impact of that decision is on our lives. So. Well, it really depends on the person, because every person that you speak to has kind of their own sort of thoughts on the matter, and so I just try to be honest and say I was just trying to do the safest thing, the thing that seemed that would be the best decision in the long term for my family. But I have friends who decided to stay, and so I can't. It's kind of this difficult situation where I feel like I made the right decision, but I don't want the people that I care about that decided to stay to feel like they've made a horrible decision, and so I can't. It really makes it challenging to try to explain, or I have to be careful about the words I choose, and and it is kind of, it's a different explanation for every person I meet, almost, because they all have different views on the matter. And I guess in the end, I'm not going to get the kind of sort of closure on the matter that I'd probably want, where I feel like it's unequivocally it's just the right thing to do in that situation. There's always going to be, it seems like, people that, especially people who weren't faced with that decision in the amount of time that we had to decide, and who aren't faced with the exposure and the risks because they're thousands of miles away. It's very hard for them to understand, I think. And I think it's still hard for them to understand the risk because they're so removed from it, and they just can't wrap their minds around what is the real reality when something like that happens, and what kind of decisions and what kind of things you have to prioritize, and what kind of sacrifices you have to make, and the amount of time that you're given to do that, and the amount of information that you have to base that decision on. It's kind of this unbearable situation where you can't, you've got to make a decision, you've got to make it in a short amount of time, and yet the information out there is just every extreme, and it's impossible to tell people. They have to experience it, and unfortunately, if everyone experienced it, then we wouldn't have a world left. So it's a really challenging thing.
Yeah.
My wife Chiaki, we met in the United States, and we worked really hard. As students, we put each other through school. I worked really hard on my Japanese, and we had this kind of dream while we were in the United States to go back to her home area, where she originally came from, north of Tokyo, and to build a house and to have her mom move in, because her mom was a single mom, and she's the only child, and so we had this. She felt like she had this really strong duty to her mother to repay her, because her mother worked really hard when she was young, and made sure that she had opportunities, even though it was really hard for her mom, and sent Chiaki to the United States, even when Chiaki's mom's family were all against her from going. And because of that, I was able to meet Chiaki, and so I was very, very appreciative of the sacrifices she made. And so we were going to go back to Japan to basically, to kind of repay in some respects. And then this happened, and Chiaki's mom has lived in the same area all her life, and so she came with us originally when we evacuated, but the next day she felt like she couldn't leave her friends. And so she decided to go back, and she's been living in that house ever since. And we don't understand that the risks are different. The risks to our son are far greater than the risks to her mom. But we still feel that she's not in a safe environment. We feel sad that we had worked so hard, and I think Chiaki feels so so heartbroken that we had gotten to that point where we had worked. I think Chiaki had worked most of her life to get to that point, maybe 10 years. I mean, that she had worked really hard to master English and to become someone that could go back to Tokyo and provide a good life for her family. and and I was a part of that plan, and we both worked really hard for that, and to give all that up, and then now her mom's by herself, kind of facing this, and we're trying to bring her over, but it's just a really difficult thing, and so that's something that is just another challenge that we're going to have to address, and our hope is that eventually we can be reunited, and it's just something that our whole family has kind of, I think, suffered because of. Our son talks about missing his grandmother all the time, that he wants to see her, and trying to explain that to a 3 or 4-year-old why we can't go back, why we have to stay away, and why we can't visit is very difficult, very challenging, and I think it's going to have an impact on his life. So. Well, our son at the time was 3 years old, and to be honest, we really weren't doing a lot of research, and in fact, the specific plant that Fukushima at the time, even though we were within 100 miles, we hadn't really done research to see that there was a nuclear plant that close to us. There's actually another plant that was even closer, apparently, and we didn't really look at the risks when we were building our house, and but in the short amount of time, we did a lot of research. And the thing is there's just not a lot of information on the matter. So, our son is, yeah, speaking of my son. Good morning, Daddy. Oh, Hanasu? Kameruni Hanasu. Hanasu Hanasu. And as the situation escalated, we were doing a lot of research. I was talking to, my boss and some other colleagues, trying to get an idea of how, what the risks were, and of course there's a large range of different information out there, and so the day that the wind shifted, we had to make a decision on what we were going to do and what was best for our 3-year-old son, Noah, and we decided that with the limited amount of information that we had, and yet the very clear very credible sources were indicating that there were true risks, and we had to kind of decide that what was the safest thing to do, and if you don't know what the situation is, the safest thing is just to leave, and so we decided that in the next 90 minutes that we had to leave, and we had to take anything that we wanted, that we thought we needed, and we weren't really thinking at the time this would be the last time that we'd be at our house for a long time, and probably the last time my son would ever be in his home. But we just decided to, do what was right at that moment, and so we left. And personally, I think it was the best decision that we made in our lives. But that's it's still one of the most difficult decisions, and it's going to take me a long time to really realize how big of a decision it was, and how what we really lost and what we gained, I guess, from making that decision. Well, I think going through that experience, I think we were very ambitious, and as far as our careers, and we wanted to go to the big city because that's where the highest paying jobs were. And after that experience, it's like we made a decision that family comes before everything else. And so we decided after that, even though I was working in the finance industry at the time, that I wanted to stay close to family. I wanted to stay in an area that was very environmentally friendly, and we just kind of we had made a decision that, and within a time frame of like 90 minutes, that basically changed our lives and really showed who we were, I think. And I think that going forward, it's of course career is important, but on top of that, you have to know your surroundings. Your environment and your health is really everything, and that's what allows you to have to be a good employee, and to work hard, and to any other ambitions you have in life, any other dreams depend on your environment, on your safety, on your health. And so every day, that's something that we've become much more conscious about, because we understand that going forward, we have to think about, that part first. We have to prioritize that part first.